Hi, welcome. My name's John Allen and I'm the host of Alden New Haven, where once a month we take a different topic of interest to the LGBTQ community in New Haven and Connecticut and explore it. And today we're going to be talking about the future of our community, LGBT youth. And I can think of no one better to talk about this with than my guest today. This is an iconic individual in the state of Connecticut. She is the go-to person for LGBT youth. She started an organization that is all about supporting LGBT youth, and she speaks regularly and writes on the topic. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Robin McCallan.
Thanks,
of
John.
True Colors.
That was very sweet.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
And I do. You know, from the community center, we regularly get calls from people all around the region, and Connecticut, and in the throughout the region, New England and New York, and we refer them to you.
And we refer back to you as well. So
Thank you, a
it
mutual
sort of works
society,
out. Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
So.
So.
Well, you know, when I was thinking about our talk today, I wanted to remind you that I believe I did the very first feature on you when I was writing for Metroline as a part-time job.
I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
That's actually true. And that would have been like in 94?
94. And you were getting ready to start the first Children from the Shadows conference.
That's what it was called then, right? Right.
Yeah.
So it could have even been 93.
Yeah.
Right.
You were just finishing up your MSW at UConn.
Yep.
And you were getting ready to start that. That was your project.
That was the project, right.
Yeah.
And so it was supposed to be, what had happened was in 93, we did a project that did a needs assessment survey of the LGBT community. And what we found was that there were almost 100 groups that supported LGBT adults. So however you might slice and dice a community, they had a group for it. So if you were into antique cars, there was a gay antique car group. If you were, you know, Christian, Jewish, Presbyterian, they had groups for all of those. And so, I mean, there was just dozens of groups. But there were only 2 groups in the whole state for youth. So one was in Hartford, it was called Your Turf, and one was in New Haven, as a matter of fact, it was called Be Glad for Youth.
I remember that, yeah.
And so I proposed to the university that I would do a conference for my fieldwork, my second year fieldwork project. And the name was so funny, it took us forever to come up with the name, because we decided that we needed co-sponsors to get some money to help pay for stuff. And so children seemed more fundable than teenagers, right? And then we did From the Shadows, Out of the Shadows, Of the Shadows, like what? And so there was all this stuff. So we were actually called, and it was supposed to be a one-time thing, but then the young people that helped organize it, and I really were so transformed by the experience that we decided to keep going. And at the time, I was actually working for the phone company. Back in the day, it was called SNET.
SNET.
Right. Well, I'd gone through Snetco and Sonicor and, you know, all the different names. But they got bought by another company. And so my boss and I were able to sort of engineer a layoff. And so that's how I started working for you know, doing this more full time. And in the 10-year anniversary of the conference, the youth took over the stage and said, "We're not children and we're not in any damn shadows. Change the name." So, and also don't put mayonnaise on the sandwiches. That was so. So at the 10-year anniversary is when we started calling it the True Colors Conference.
Well, you know, I think that's really very apropos because you know, so much of this was before Ellen's coming out in 1997. So it really, a lot of euphemistic language was being used, and I'm so pleased to know that you include LGBT youth in the actual name.
Right.
And you know, as we were talking, you said that this is the largest.
Right, it's the largest LGBTQI ABCDEFG youth conference in the country.
Right.
And,
the largest in the country.
Right, so last year we had about 3,400 people. The most we've had is 39, but UConn said 39 is too much.
Wow.
And so last year we had to put a cutoff and we sold out, which was really sad. I actually had to say no to like 3 middle schools, which just broke my heart.
Right.
And so this year people are registering early.
But it happens, the last several years you've been doing it at UConn in stores.
And actually this is, I think, our 10th year at UConn.
Right, because I remember you've held it at Central Connecticut State University.
And we were at Central for a number of years. We were at the University of Hartford before that.
Yes.
And we were at UConn in West Hartford before that.
But now this seems to be a semi-permanent home.
Well, it is because it's the only facility large enough to hold us. So we looked at the convention center downtown, which they're large enough to hold the opening and closing, but if we were going to use, we have like 54 workshops in every slot.
Right.
We would have had to use every hotel room in Greater Hartford, and still wouldn't have had enough. And then we would have had middle schoolers wandering around the streets of Hartford. So we're like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen.
Right.
So
but
that's why
so the classrooms, empty classrooms, probably make a lot of sense.
It's during spring break,
yeah.
and so we
and
use
it's always
4
during
buildings.
spring break.
Yeah. And we use 4 buildings, and
wow.
And so it really is an exciting experience that the young people, and more than half the young people that come on Friday are straight allies.
Wow.
But there's this energy that comes from people feeling free to be whoever they are, straight, you know, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, two-spirit, same-gender, loving, pansexual, flexible, not straight, not labeling, all the different ways that kids identify. Everybody's sort of free to be, and there's an energy that is really just impossible to describe.
I would concur. Every time I've been, there's just a wonderful energy that's going on, and to be around so many young people that are just don't seem to have the same kind of restrictions that people of my generation have grown up with, and that's so refreshing.
For years at the conference, we had to do a workshop for grown-ups at the end of the day that called some version of "I wish I had this," because the grown-ups were like both sad and sort of angry by the end of the day, and they couldn't even really know why they were feeling like they were feeling, but there was a missing, you know, and so we haven't had to do that in a few years, but you know, it was kind of.
So the conference, it's called the True Colors Conference, and it's always held at the UConn Stores campus, and it's in March.
It's March during spring break, so it's March 16th and 17th this year.
Right.
People can still register for about another 3 or 4 weeks. People can still register.
Right.
And
if they don't get in this year, there's always next.
There's always next year.
And this is an exciting time because this is going to be the 25th
anniversary.
Right.
That's so exciting. We're going to be launching a 25-year anniversary project at the conference, and which would be really interesting. I think we've been doing a bunch of different archiving projects. So for example, one of the projects we have is archiving of Gay Spirit Radio, which I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I remember,
Keith Brown,
yeah, Keith Brown.
And so he has been doing Gay Spirit Radio every week for 37 years.
Wow.
And so
one of our early pioneers.
Right, exactly. And so that's really the history of the LGBT community in Connecticut.
Yes.
And so, and even nationally to a certain extent. So we've been archiving his shows, using kids, young people in Hartford, training them as technicians, and giving them a job skill, and then also giving us the archives. I think we've got 15 years archived
Wow.
so far.
And what do you do as an archive?
Well, when it's archived, it's changed to a digital format, it's uploaded to a website, and then it becomes searchable.
Wonderful.
And people, if they wanted to hear, about, there's some of the icons of the LGBT community went through interviews, just the music that Keith did, the history of HIV, and the experiences through the 80s and 90s is all recorded in his information. And we're going to be doing something similar with the True Colors archives. Some of our archives are at Central and in different places.
Which they've done a marvelous job.
Right,
There's
they
two
have really.
places that I know of that are doing
Right.
archives of LGBT history in Connecticut. One's at Yale and the other is
one's at Central.
And
Yeah.
Central seems to focus a little bit more on Connecticut history.
Exactly.
Whereas
exactly.
the archives at Yale tend to be national.
more broad,
and,
right,
yeah.
exactly. And so, that's an interesting piece. I think one of the things that's true about True Colors is that we just have kind of grown based on the needs. So we started with the conference, then at the time, and this was in 1994, there were only 4 gay-straight alliances in the whole state. One was in a public school, that was at Staples, and the other 3 were in independent schools, private schools. And so we started doing gay-straight alliance summits in 1995. And now there's like 260 gay-straight alliances. Well, they're actually calling them now gender and sexuality alliances.
Oh, wow.
To be a broader, not just gay and straight, but
the language is constantly evolving.
right. And
but it's amazing. I mean, there's only 169 towns in the
right,
state.
well, multiple schools and high schools and more middle schools now.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
that
so that's
even
really
in middle
cool.
schools.
Well, the average age kids are coming out is 11 to 13.
Right.
That's a middle school issue.
It is. For our generation, it was 26 and 28, and I know that it's been growing.
Yeah, and moving down.
Yeah, moving
and
down.
for trans kids, I've done probably 18 or 20 trainings in Connecticut with elementary schools that have had kindergartners and first graders making social transitions from one gender to another. That's a sea change. I don't think that's because there's more trans kids. I think we now have a language for people to describe what their experiences are in ways that other people are able to listen and hear what's going on sooner. So, we still work with the Gay Straight Alliances. We have youth leadership development. We run a summer queer academy, and we have a mentoring program, and it's Connecticut's only mentoring program for LGBTQ youth. And all of the kids in that mentoring program are under the care of the Department of Children and Families, which means that they've been rejected by their families on the basis of their orientation or gender identity and expression.
But how great that you have this service available.
So I mean, it's definitely challenging. It's definitely a lot because they're kids that have experienced so much rejection. But we have 3 kids in the New Haven area. There's one directly in New Haven and 2 in Hamden that we're looking for mentors for.
And what does a mentor do?
So.
Do they have to be LGBT?
No, mentors are LGBT or allies, and in fact, allies have a very important role because sometimes they're the first straight person who's ever been nice to our kids, right?
Even now, right?
Even now,
it's
even
just
now,
amazing.
Right? So, so what mentors do is there's a background check, there's a training, there's an interview, and then all mentors start as what are called group mentors. And a group mentor's job is to participate in one activity a month, transport a kid or 2 to the activity, and then hang out with them. And the goal of starting that way, rather than starting right off the bat with a one-on-one, like big brothers, big sisters mentor, is it gives the mentors a chance to see and experience who our kids are before they make a longer-term commitment. Because in lots of ways, our kids are not mini-me's, right? Right. They have different experiences than many of us had. Even if we've experienced rejection, most of us stayed within our families of origin. And so, and then after a few months, a month or 2 or 3, when a mentor gets to know the kids, then we can make a choice together. Do you want to go forward in a more, in a larger commitment? And once you're a mentor, that is, you commit to at least a year, though our goal is a lifetime connection. You meet with your kid 3 times a month, and you talk every week. So it really is like a Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
But only with specifically
Right,
geared to LGBT
Right,
youth.
but specifically, all the kids in our program are somewhere on the LGBT spectrum.
And are they children or
No,
are they some young adults?
Well, they range in age from, the program is from 14 to 21. We have a lot of exceptions, so we have kids who are younger than 14. So we have a number of kids who are 12 or 13. The majority of them are 16, 17-ish, and then a few that are beginning to age out of care that might be in the 18.
I know that's
range.
such a very tenuous time for so many of these young people because they're almost sort of booted out of the DCF system.
And if they're not in school or able to work, they will get booted out at 18.
Right.
And so part of our job is to create a, sort of a safety net, a lifelong connection. Because I don't know about you, but I was not ready to be solely on my own at 18.
I know, I've often said we all needed a guardian at age 18,
Exactly.
right?
Like how many times in your young adult life did you call one or more of your parents and go like, hey,
I know.
And so, or your grandparent or some elder in your family to get.
Right.
So we're trying to give them sort of a safety net and a sense of connection.
Wonderful.
We're talking with Patrick and the folks at the New Haven Pride Center about the possibility of doing an LGBT youth group at the Pride Center.
Oh, wonderful.
And if that happens, then that would be something that we would sort of partner with, so that we could create some services down, in this area for the mentoring kids to do.
Because I know that you're all over the state and
We
all
are,
over the
but
region.
it's also, I mean, we're a statewide agency, but there's only 5 of us.
Right.
So, it is what
You're
it is, and
stretched a little
we
thin.
try to partner with people who are already doing the work to support the work that they're doing. So we work a lot with the Triangle Community Center. That we've just begun working with. We worked with Josh before. But again, the community center, now that you have paid staff,
paid staff makes all the difference in the world. Yeah, it really does. And there really are only the 2 community centers,
Right, exactly.
Triangle Community in Norwalk and the New Haven Pride Center in New Haven.
And there are other youth groups around the state. There's Out CT in New London. There's a group in Waterbury. One of the things that we've been doing is identifying areas where there's no services and then using interns to do an organizing project to get other people engaged in recognizing that this is part of their population and they should be serving them.
Right.
So one of our interns, Joelle, actually started that in Waterbury, and now there's a whole group, and they just got funding, and they're running a youth group and a parents group, and and they're going to be doing a needs and assessment survey. So that's in Waterbury. We need to head up to Litchfield because there's like nada in Litchfield. We need to head out in the Danielson area,
Danielson and
Putnam, and those. There's nothing out there
because those are so remote. They really are.
Exactly.
And even difficult to get into Hartford, even though they're up in the upper northern parts of Connecticut.
Right. I mean, it takes an hour or more in back roads to get to, those places. Then cell coverage is not good, and So we've had. I mean, there was a kid we had in Pomfret for a long time that we just couldn't find a mentor for because we didn't have access to, like, where do people hang out? Where are the, I know there's queer folks, are you? Where are you? So.
Well, we sort of got a little ahead of ourselves on some of these things, but I wanted to do an overview of what was it that True Colors is, what are your overall services that you do?
So we've got 5 staff, and I think we have 7 services. So we've got the conference, we have the mentoring program, we have youth leadership development, we have the Safe Harbor Project, which is a collaboration between True Colors and DCF that does both policy and programming. In fact, we help them write their new transgender policy, which should be out in the next couple of weeks.
That's exciting.
Which is very exciting, which will privilege kids' gender over their genitals, which is really a huge thing.
Because I know there was that horrible situation that occurred a couple of years ago
with one of our kids, and
putting her in prison because
Exactly.
they didn't know where else to put her.
Exactly. So this new policy should make a big difference in that arena. We also recruit foster parents for youth of all orientations. And interestingly, I posted about a trans boy from Meriden a couple of days ago, and I guess early last week I posted, and that post got shared over 900 times,
wow.
and people came out of the woodwork
Wow.
to support this kid. So
That's
we have
amazing.
choices of where he's going to end up,
Mm-hmm.
which is really cool.
That is.
And so, you know, and then the last thing is we do training. I personally train about 6,000 people a year.
Wow, yes, and you do an outstanding job.
Thank
Anybody
you.
that has ever had
Thank
the
you.
privilege of being in your
Thanks.
audience is
Thanks.
really, it's just so affirming.
That's where a lot of my heart is in the training.
Yes, it is, and
Yeah.
I know that I've been, you know, friends with you for many years, and I know that that is truly one of your passions and
Yeah.
something that you're just so good at, and
Thanks.
so affirming in a way to, you know, disarm some of the negativity too.
Right.
So that's really good. Well, I wanted to know, what do you know, I think Connecticut is among one of the best places to be in this country if you're an LGBT person. And certainly we have the legal protections for some of these things. But I wonder, what do you think is the state of, you know, sort of where we are with LGBT youth? How are we supporting our youth?
So in some ways we're doing a really good job, and that, you know, there's laws that are written into anti-discrimination, so a teacher could lose their license if they discriminated against an LGBT kid, or if they discriminated on the basis of any of the protected classes. I think that our recent passage of an anti-conversion therapy bill was huge by the state.
Right, and we're honoring them at the Dorothy Awards.
Right,
the,
exactly.
Senator Beth Bayh and Jeff Curry.
Right, who are really very, very powerful, especially Jeff. I mean, Beth did a great job too, but Jeff got almost all the co-sponsors, and Beth got everybody on the Senate. It was really, I mean, it was a brilliant.
It is amazing. I just am
and,
so proud. Yay, Connecticut.
And there's religious exemptions. So the little boy that I was looking for a home for last week, his parents took him to conversion therapy.
Oh my gosh.
You know, so and then, you know, they humiliated him in front of his church community.
Oh, how
you know,
awful.
trying to undo his transness. And that, so I don't know what we're going to do, if anything is possible, around the religious exemptions.
Yeah,
Connecticut's
so
religious
powerful.
exemptions are huge. So for example, you could be a maintenance worker in a Catholic school and be gay, and they could fire you, and it would not be illegal in Connecticut because the religious exemption is that broad.
Even though we are one of the states that does have protections
Right, so we have
for
protection
employment.
for employment, but if you were employed in an agency that had a religious base, that even if your work had nothing to do with the promotion of that religious tradition, you could still be fired. You could work in food service and get fired. And there's been cases where that's happened. The other thing that's coming up for kids is, you know, the number of trans kids coming out is growing. And so kids are changing their names, and the schools are pretty good at changing them, you know, on some of the documentation, but we have to figure out, so if you're a 10-year-old who changed your name, but you didn't have the money to go to probate court or whatever, or you're too young to go to probate court to make that choice.
Right,
And
because you have to be 18 or at least have your parents' permission.
So let's say you've been doing that name for like 5 years, and now you're filling out your FAFSA forms for financial aid for college. You have to use your birth name, and so that's a real
and
disconnect.
it can be so confusing for people.
So, and then what name goes on your diploma? What name goes on your transcripts? So I think that's a kind of a loophole that we need to figure out what the right, you know, how do we not have to make kids go through probate court? That, you know, it costs money to do that.
Yes, it's at least $250
exactly.
to go into probate.
And if you don't have, they will waive the fee if you're already on some other benefits. But just because you don't have benefits doesn't mean that you have $250 that you can, you know, so.
Especially for young people.
Especially for young people. And so I think that's something that we need to look at. You know, the other thing that's true, I think, is that sometimes a kid comes out and everything's fine. Their family's fine, their schools are fine, their friends are fine, everything's fine. Sometimes a kid comes out and their whole world implodes.
Yes.
And so how do we do something around the kids whose worlds are still imploding? You know, and that the mentoring program, the training, those are things that are movements in the right direction, but we still need, I think we still need adults to be out everywhere.
Right. You know, I say that everywhere. It's the single thing that a person, an LGBT person, can do at any age is to come out, because the more people that come out, the easier it is for others to do the same.
Exactly. And the most effective form of prejudice reduction is face-to-face interactions over a period of time. So if people know LGBT people, it breaks down the biases. It's when, and it's interesting, I ask people, when I do trainings now, I say, how many people in here know somebody in your family or friendship network who's LG or B? And literally every hand in the room goes up, which means that the biases are going down. Then I say, how many people know somebody personally who's transgender? And never more than a third of the hands go up. And so that's still an area, gender is still an area where we need to do ongoing work.
It makes people very uncomfortable for when people transgress gender boundaries. It really still makes people uncomfortable.
And that's true, gay or trans.
Yes.
So, you know, the more gender transgressive an LGB person is, the more harassment they receive. And then a trans person, it's exponentially more.
But although you have to admit that shows like RuPaul's Drag Race is just, you know, exponentially changed the dynamic in the public discourse.
In some areas, I think it has. In some areas, I think it has.
Well, in our remaining moments, I did want to just talk about some of the things that, you know, I'm going to direct people to your website, because I think that you have an amazing website full of all kinds of resources. And one of them is the True Colors Resource Guide. Now, I have one that...
An old one.
An older one, and I know these come out every year, and I usually snag one whenever they come to the center.
And the one that's on the website was updated in September, so it is the most current.
But it is just, when you look at it, it's got ads of things, it's got therapists, it's got books, it's got all the high school gay, straight, you know, the alliances that are in there. It's got any resource that you might need in Connecticut and the region. And it's certainly something that we refer to, and it's available online.
And it's free.
And it's free.
And if you prefer not to do it online, you can call us and we'll mail you a copy. Right. And then we also have a youth resource guide that comes out once a year. That's a great guide, but it's not very youth friendly, because it's got a lot of words.
And the other thing that what we've been doing with you through the Pride Center is that you've been spotlighting our scholarships.
Yes, exactly.
Passing that around, and you are sort of the go-to place for finding out scholarships for LGBT people.
And the scholarships are listed in there, and then we do a mailing every February. In fact, we're working on it now.
Yes.
To get them out to all of the schools in the state, so that they can get young people to apply for them.
Right. And if any organizations that people that might be watching that need speakers or whatever, that you are certainly available to do that as. And I just think that's great. Well, I think, you know, in our last remaining moment, is there any words of wisdom, anything that you see on the horizon? What do you see for the next 25 years?
Oh my God, the next 25 years. I think the next 25 years, I think that trans is going to be, that we're going to blow out the boundaries of gender in the next 25 years. And that one of the things that trans folks are doing for all people is that as they push out the boundaries of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman, they make more room for everybody. And so, you know, I'm very grateful to the trans pioneers who are making more room for me to be whatever kind of woman I want to be.
And they are pioneers.
Yeah, exactly.
And they are so brave. Somebody to, you know, I often thought anybody that was, you know, came out of the closet was a brave person, and they are. But someone that is able to come out as a, you know, and declare their gender identity is amazing.
I think that it's all about creating a world in which everyone is free to be themselves, and that that's part of our mission. You know, it's certainly part of the Pride Center's mission, that our goal is to create an environment where everybody is free to be, because that is a place I want to live in.
Yes, me too. And you're doing it. And thank you so much for being here. This was so much fun.
Yeah, it was fun to talk to you.
Okay, and I'm John Allen, the host of Alden, New Haven, and We've been speaking with Robin McCallan of True Colors in Hartford. Thank you.